everyone, so today I am back with another top 5 roundup of some of my favourite foundations. I did this video a few weeks ago and in that I kind of talked about my top 5 holy grail must have foundations, so I will leave that on the screen somewhere for you to go and click if you haven't watched already. And I actually mentioned in that video that I was planning on doing a drugstore version of that, and a lot of you guys were really interested in seeing that, so that is what I have for you today. So I'm basically going to be going through my top 5 drugstore budget, kind of lower priced foundations, and as with the first video I'm going to basically show you these from order of lightest coverage to fullest and just run through them and chat about foundation. So when it comes to drugstore foundation, I feel like there are definitely not as many options, but I feel like all of these match me really well. I really like them, and actually they're very comparable to some other higher end foundations, and in fact maybe even a little bit better at times. So the first one I have here is probably the newest discovery of all of these. I think when you find a drugstore foundation that you love, it's something that you really keep in your collection and that you cherish forever. I think it's just a lot harder to find a favourite, so when one launches and you like it, you basically stick to it. But this one is new, so this is Bourjois City Radiance. It's a skin protecting foundation with a brightening effect for fresh and even complexion, and this one is an anti-pollution foundation as well, which I like. It has SPF 30 in it and it's supposed to be radiance boosting, and honestly all of that rings pretty true with this one. I would compare this to a tinted moisturiser, but definitely a tinted moisturiser that has really good coverage. This is the lighter coverage of everything that I'm talking about, but actually it's still pretty kind of light to medium. I'm yet to find an amazing drugstore just proper tinted moisturiser, so if you have any recommendations please let me know. I really like to put this one on when my skin is feeling very dull and I don't necessarily want to load it up with loads of full coverage foundation to kind of cover that up. I just kind of want to enhance it and make it look a bit brighter and fresher, and I think that this really does that. It has a great consistency in that it's definitely not really slippery and oily and shiny as some radiance boosting foundations can be, but it just gives you this really beautiful glow in a very dewy but very kind of manageable way. So if you have oily skin you might have to powder with this, but I still don't think that it would be too much for you. For me with dry skin though, this is perfect. It's very hydrating and it just keeps my skin feeling really comfortable for a really long time. So if I'm after something quite quick and lazy but I want a bit of coverage without having to go for a full foundation, this is what I love to use. Another favourite from Bourjois of course is Bourjois Healthy Mix. This is such a cult classic. I've been through so many bottles of this and it was actually probably one of the very first foundations that I ever bought, other than the Maybelline Dream Matte Mousse, which actually was my very first foundation purchase, but we won't talk about that. This was probably the first drugstore foundation that I really liked, and I remember wearing this to college, and I really think you can't go wrong with this if you're looking for a first foundation. If you perhaps don't wear foundation that often and you just want something that is still going to look like you and look like your skin basically, because this is what this does. Again, it's another one that's very dewy, very radiance boosting and kind of just gives you that nice glow. This probably has a little bit more to it than the City Radiance foundation. It's a bit more hydrating, a little bit thicker in texture in terms of how much moisture actually is in this, but it still feels so comfortable to wear on my skin. Again, I reach for this just on really lazy days when I don't want to have to fuss with my foundation. But then actually the foundation that I've been wearing the most recently is the Rimmel Match Perfection foundation, and this has been out for so long. I feel like they've done this for years and years. This has become one of my favourite go-to foundations. I really just grab for this one every single day. It's kind of similar in a way to the Healthy Mix in that it is a moisturising foundation, so really great for dry patches. I feel like sometimes this actually helps to cover up my dry patches instead of making them look more obvious, which is great. But actually the thing I like about it the most is that it is just a very blurring foundation. It's super kind of flattering on your skin. It really fills in pores, fine lines, any kind of uneven texture, so including dryness, and it just makes your skin look so kind of soft focus in a way that I'm guessing only could happen on Photoshop, but really this does it in real life too, and I just really love it. I think it's such a great everyday foundation. I've talked about it so many times but I'm quickly going to mention it again. I also love the concealer from this range, favourite drugstore concealer ever. So this whole Match Perfection range, I really don't think you can go wrong, and this is just perfect, so I love this one. So L'Oreal True Match foundation. I've kind of been through a long journey with this one. I've had so many different iterations of it. I've had different packaging, I think different formulas, and I think it's taken me this long to actually realise that I do really like this. I don't know if it's because they've changed it or if my skin has finally caught up to liking it, but actually I think this is a really good foundation and not one that there is anything similar to in the drugstore. So the way I would describe this is that it is a super pigmented foundation. It's very thin but it is very pigmented, so you can get a really kind of good medium to full coverage with this one. You just kind of need a dot, and if you spread it out on your hand you can just see how far it goes. It is that pigmented, and there really aren't any other drugstore drugstore foundations that I have found like that. So this is amazing if you want a very flawless complexion and you want your skin to look really, really perfected, but you hate wearing very cakey foundations and you really just don't like feeling product on your skin, because you just need such a minimal amount of this. A little bit goes such a long way. And also, if you don't like full coverage, if you want something very natural, you can just put basically 4 dots of this across your face and really, really blend it in. So really take your time buffing it in with a foundation brush or a beauty blender, and it just looks so much like natural skin. The finish of this one is quite different too. It's not dewy, but it gives a nice kind of luminosity to your skin, and it's definitely not matte either. It's kind of one of those demi-matte satin finish foundations, which I don't usually tend to get on with, but I think when it is something like this that is so pigmented and so full covering, it really just kind of works to have that sort of finish. So this will always be my go-to for days when I want to cover up quite a bit, but I really don't want much product or kind of the feeling of foundation on my face. So that is L'Oreal True Match. So last up in this top 5, I have another one from L'Oreal, and I realise that I'm not being particularly diverse with the brands that I've chosen, but honestly, it takes a lot for me to be impressed by a drugstore foundation, and really there are only a handful of brands that I trust to make a good foundation. I think it's different for different products, but especially when it comes to foundation, I like to kind of stick to what I know. So these brands are ones that I really trust, and this is the Infallible 24-Hour Matte Foundation. I know they have a slightly different version of this in the US, it's in a different packaging. I think it's a bit shorter and a bit flatter, but I think it is still exactly the same product. So from the name of this, 24-Hour Matte Foundation, you would expect me to absolutely hate this, and I really was expecting to just not like this, but I ended up trying it in Boots. I kind of swatched it on the back of my hand, as you do, and I just kind of felt like buying it, basically. I just wanted to try it, and I am so glad I did, because this is actually an amazing foundation. It's a bit similar to True Match in the way that it is very pigmented, so this gives such full coverage, and yet it's not a really cakey, really heavy foundation. I think with matte foundations you always run the risk of things looking a little bit cakier just purely because of the finish, but this is thin enough to kind of stop that happening most of the time. It's never going to feel as light as something like the Bourjois City Radiance, but it still feels very comfortable to wear, especially if you're used to doing full coverage foundations on a daily basis. I think you would find this one so comfortable. The way that I found myself using this the most often though is actually to mix it in with other foundations. I find this mixes so beautifully with all different formulas, and actually my favourite thing to put it into is a tinted moisturiser, so something very light and very glowy with a tiny little drop of this in it. Just adds a tiny bit more coverage, a little bit more flawlessness, and it still has that really dewy, beautiful glowy effect that the tinted moisturiser brings, but with the added coverage of this. So I think it's a really good one to just pop into any foundation that you own. If you're having a bad skin day, if you feel like you just want to cover up a little bit more, just a little drop of this really makes such a difference. So another great one from L'Oreal, another one that I really enjoy using. And that is my top 5. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope that was informative for you if you've been looking for a new drugstore foundation to try. And please, again, with this video, we did the same thing in the last one. Leave me a comment telling me what your #1 absolute favourite must-have drugstore foundation is. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you all again tomorrow for another I Covet June. Bye!